As I look out among you today, I'm truly blessed to tell you that I've spoken as far north as Toronto and as far west as the University of California in Berkeley. And I've been on the radio in England. But although I grew up near Charleston, admit, as is the case of many of you, I was born right here at 371 South Liberty Street at the John Capers Bull Hospital. And I'm reminded of the words of Judy Garland in the movie Wizard of Oz. Be ever so humble, there's no place like home. The theme for this wonderful gathering is one that is dear to my heart, reaching the hearts and souls of the next generation. That's important in so many ways, because in spite of the fact that one of us is in the seat of power in Washington, D.C., it seems that on the ground level, it is the best of times and yet the worst of times. It seems as many of us have forgotten Dr. King's advice earlier in the freedom speech, one of the parts that you don't hear on television. Where he warned us against drinking from the cup of bitterness and wallowing in the valley of despair. It is sad to report that 50 years after he said these words, many of us have made the mistake of doing just that. Malcolm X, who was killed 49 years ago yesterday, spoke in his autobiography of little black children before they could talk, saw that their parents considered themselves inferior or less than what they are. This was caused by the conditions that these parents and ancestors faced many years ago, and to some extent, as we have seen in the recent events of Florida and the recent actions of our governor to some extent today. Conditions that told them that because they were taken from the African continent in the condition of slavery, that they were ugly, dumb, drew heat, and good for all things involving the body, but nothing for the mind, and that could not unite for this to save their lives. And because the outside world told us this so often, many of us heard it too much and believed it, and even worse, passed it to our children. To make matters even worse, in the last 50 years, many of us have departed from the wise teachings of our elders and made many unnecessary mistakes that were repeated through the last few generations. Thus, many of us have filled the ears of our children with bitter teachings, such as, "And you don't do nothing but run the streets like your mama," or "You going to jail just like your daddy," or "You going to be nothing just like the rest of your family." And when they grow up and actually do these things, people have the nerve to wonder what happened. In the words of Proverbs 23rd chapter, 7th verse, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." So how do we reach the hearts and souls of the next generation? One way is through the power of the tongue. If we can use our tongues to destroy, we can surely use them to build. History teaches us this. It teaches us of the young man who grew up in a school where the teacher thought he was stupid. And the teacher said that it was a waste of time keeping him in school. Well, that got back to the young man's mother. And the young man's mother went to the school and told the teacher that her son had more sense in his little finger than the teacher had in his whole body. Well, that young man only had 3 months of education, but went on to invent the light bulb, the record player, the motion picture, Thomas Alva Edison. So much for teachers. There was also the young man who, about 70 years ago, he was playing with a group of young white boys. And the parents of the white boys told him, "Well, since you're a you can't play with our son anymore." So he went back home and cried. And the mother and grandmother sat down and told him, "No matter what anybody says, you are just as good as anybody." He proved it right, because last month we celebrated his birthday as a national holiday. And he truly took those teachings to heart. There was another case. Some of you might remember back in 1969 when men first landed on the moon. They splashed down in the Pacific Ocean of the islands of Hawaii. And President Nixon came out there to greet the astronauts, and a grateful and proud nation applauded these astronauts. And while these men were out there receiving their awards from President Nixon, there was a proud grandfather who had his grandson on top of his shoulder. And he told the grandson, who was about 6 or 7 years old at the time, said, "Son, look at this. This is what we as Americans can do if we put our minds to it." He listened well. He's in the White House now. And you often have this idea that so many of our young children are doing so much worse in schools than other people. A lot of people tend to deal with what I call the excusology. Some people say, well, those tests are biased against us. We can't pass those things. They don't say nothing about us or our culture. Hold up. You have young people from China, India, Israel, Saudi Arabia, whose parents don't speak a word of English and do so much better than the children whose parents do speak English. Why? Because those parents instilled in them that they can do well and do better. Then our kids often hear the ignorance of the barbershop, the street corner, the beauty parlor. Things like, man, the white man don't want you to get ahead. White man don't want you to learn your history. You ain't no use trying because the white man this and the white man that. To that I say it is not about what they are doing to you, but what you are willing to do for yourself. Where would we be if Medgar Evers, down in the state of Mississippi, said, man, these Ku Klux Klan's too much for me. And these people trying to kill me later for this. Unfortunately, he did not listen to that kind of talk. He went ahead, and in spite of his martyrdom, his death led to the freedom of his people in the state of Mississippi. What if Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman said, man, ain't no, oh yeah, I almost forgot. I'm glad you're here for this part. What if those two greats in our history said, man, those dogs will get up if we run away. The master might hang us. Man, I don't know about that. No, not only did these folks free themselves, as this gracious lady just demonstrated about an hour ago, both Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman did not rest on the laurels of their own freedom. They went back in their own way and got as many of their people out of slavery as possible, while Harriet Tubman kept running back to get the people out of slavery and take them up to freedom. Frederick Douglass sat down with Abraham Lincoln and negotiated for the freedom of his people and has educated America to the realities of slavery. No, these folks didn't just sit back, they got up and did something. But ladies and gentlemen, let me take this home to the Sparkle City level. Back in the early days of Spartanburg, there was a man named Mr. Joseph Young who came to this area and noticed the land on South Liberty Street. He didn't sit back and say, man, the black people around here never gonna have nothing. No, he bought land. He made businesses and leased out businesses and created the district that we once knew here on South Liberty Street. Mary H. Wright, who was born in slavery, didn't sit back and say, well, this white man don't want us to get educated. Man, forget that. No, 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 no. Mary H. Wright saw to it that the youth of this city were educated well into her elder years before her death in 1946. And a monument nearby and an elementary school is named after her to this day. There was LaVon Morgan, who figured that the people of Spartanburg needed a newspaper to learn about what was going on in case they didn't hear it from others. He set up the Piedmont Indicator newspaper. There were also physicians, the great Dr. John Wesley Sexton, Dr. Theodore K. Gregg, and after Dr. Theodore K. Gregg died, Dr. John Capers Bull came to this area and took it to the next level and built the Bull Clinic Hospital, where many of us in this room were born. There was also, of course, as we know, people such as James Talbot, who didn't listen to the naysayers, went on to from being a high school coach to the first African-American mayor of this city. Then, some years later, people could have said, well, they don't write about us in the history books, so I guess we didn't do anything. People such as Linda Conley of the Spartanburg Herald-Journal, Brenda Lee Price, B. Hill, Dwayne Pruitt, all got together and jotted down the history of Spartanburg so we can all go to the library and learn these things. And here's some other stuff, too. Did you know that back in 1937, John Woodward of the funeral home, along with a dentist by the name of J.B. Walker, founded the Spartanburg Negro Civic League. They provided not only health education to the people of Spartanburg and sought to build parks for our city. In 1939, this civic league, along with local attorney A.C. Platt, stopped the Spartanburg General Hospital from firing its black nurses. 4 years after that, Reverend W.L. Wilson of Macedonia started a local branch of the NAACP. And in that same year, one of the main people who fought to equalize the salaries of black teachers and white teachers in the city of Spartanburg was the principal of Carver High School himself, the great Dr. C.C. Woodson. And when the movement heated up, one of its major spokesmen was your very own Reverend C.M. Johnson, whose name proudly stands right out there on the center. And I've got some news for you. It wasn't just Reverend Johnson who was also involved with civil rights here, along with Reverend Booker T. Sayers and numerous others. Right here in this church, as a matter of fact, there was a generation of young people who listened when Reverend Johnson spoke of the need for us to fight for civil rights. And in July of 1960, a large number of them went down to the Crest, right there downtown, to join the sit-in for their fight for equal dignity. One of them was 11 years old, and she's right here in this church. The lady who just introduced me, Ms. Carol Richards. You see, you don't just have to look at Martin Luther King. You don't just have to look at Fannie Lou Hamer or all the others and so forth. They're great people, but you in Spartanburg have your own heroes right here. And if you sometimes listen, you find out that there's more than you realize. And to give you a good example of this, my cousin, Charles Atchison, who some of you probably know, he and my grandfather, Jesse Montgomery, they had the Deluxe Cab Company back from the 40s up until, I believe, the 60s. And as many of you know, around the time my grandfather Jesse died, Charles took over to the next level, and he founded the Atchison Transportation Company. Well, Charles is my second cousin. His father, Will Atchison, married my great-aunt Bessie Montgomery, who was Jesse's sister. And so I came up here back in July for the family reunion. And I saw something that is an important lesson in all of this. Charles was honest, in his 80s, as many of you know. And the family got up and told his story. Well, a couple of young cousins, two young girls in their 20s, from the Los Angeles branch of our family, got up and walked over to Charles while I was sitting with him and told Charles, you know what we want to do? We want to start a franchise of the Atchison Transportation Company in Los Angeles. You see, the point of that, ladies and gentlemen, is this. It is not enough to tell young people we had all these great businesses in South Liberty Street and we don't have them anymore. The message should be, we once built these businesses on South Liberty Street, but through you, we can have them again. You see, the thing is that I've heard a lot of older people say, I got mine, now you get yours. No, 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 no. No one got theirs on their own. Babies, when they're born, they don't come out talking about anti-disestablishmentarianism. They start out with goo-goo gaga until somebody teaches them about anti-disestablishmentarianism, right or wrong? Right. All right? No matter who you are, someone had to help you become successful. So the motto should not be, I got mine, you got yours, but somebody help me get mine, let me help you get yours, and you help other people get theirs. But some of you might say, well, I'm not that educated. I don't know about these kind of things to tell my children. All I know is what I've been told. Well, two things about that. Some people make the mistake of getting their history on the internet. And let me tell you something. 90% of what you see on the internet about our history is J-U-N-K. They've got the story that a black man named John Hanson was president back in the 1700s. Now, come on, folks. How could a man be president of a country where he can't even vote? That's stupid. The only black president we have is the one we have right now. Then they have this thing called the Willie Lynch letter that supposedly says that one man named Willie Lynch made a short speech that destroyed the black people. Folks, that's foolishness. Our ancestors were too strong for one man to do that. It was a long, complicated process. By the way, the guy who wrote that, his name was Dr. Sabina Ashanti. He's now in the North Carolina Central University in Durham. He admitted that it was a forgery. So don't go to the internet for your history. Go right to the library. Go to the books. Do the work. And if you can't, so some people might say, well, I can't read too good to do that. Hold it. Throughout every city, there are programs that teach adults how to read. Now, Carol mentioned that my biological mother was Anne Montgomery. Well, as a matter of fact, she also taught adults the AWARE program. And by an interesting irony, I wound up doing the same thing for prisoners some years later. So there's no excuse. You can go and learn. And so you have to always encourage these children with things like this. Encourage them to learn the difference between the truth and the trash, the facts and the foolishness, the ignorance from the intelligence, and to fight for freedom and not for foolishness. And once they learn, teach others around them to learn, to educate themselves, to lead themselves, so that we can become a better community, and that these ceremonies of this kind will not be in vain. And hopefully, God will smile on them, and that on that particular note,